Hi, everybody. I'm Susan Langenhennick. I'm the Director of Communications for the Preservation Resource Center, and I want to welcome y'all to a program that I've been really looking and you'll see why, because this house is an absolute charmer. And our homeowner, Dee Speed, who is an incredibly talented woman that I'll tell you a little more about in just a sec, is graciously zooming in from California, where she splits her time. She's a native New Orleanian, but goes back and forth. But before we get started, I want to go through a little bit of our housekeeping, as my colleague Nathan Lott likes to say. And first, thank all of our Shotgun House Month sponsors, because without them, we would not be able to do this series. We greatly appreciate their sponsorship. Entablature Design Build and Entablature Realty, Clandestine Event Rentals, Axelrod and Associates Home Inspectors, Colmex Construction, Green Coast Enterprises, Atomic Architecture, Claire Lewis Designs, Durable Slate Company, Preservation Title, Ellie Sanders and Isabel Sanders, iMoto, who created this presentation you'll see tonight, and 89.9, which is one of our media sponsors. We also really need to give a big shout out to the Hellas Foundation and the Klein Lehman Esperanza Fund for support of all of PRC's programs, not just Shotgun House. And the Ella West Freeman Foundation for support of our conservation and education programs, which are such a big part of what PRC does. And the Eugenie and Joseph Jones Family Foundation for support of our Revival Grants program. That is a wonderful program that tonight, all donations that anyone makes through this program will go to support PRC's Revival Grants. It's an exciting thing for us because this is the heart and soul of what PRC does, is that we help people preserve and protect their homes and the historic architecture and neighborhoods of the city. And our Revival Grants program is a big part of that. We provide free home repairs to low to moderate income homeowners in the Treme neighborhood through our Revival Grants program. And we hope to eventually be able to expand that to all historic neighborhoods in the city. And so all donations made tonight during Shotgun House Month will go to support our Revival Grants program. And we are asking that if you can do it, we would appreciate you thinking about donating a $25 donation to the PRC. That would be the cost of an in-person Shotgun House tour ticket if this was an in-person event. And we do hope to bring in-person events back. But in the meantime, that's a huge support to us. And like I said, it will directly fund our Revival Grants program. We need to give a huge shout out to our members because PRC is a 501c3 nonprofit. And without our members and supporters and donors, we couldn't do the work that we do. And so we absolutely appreciate it. Any amount of donation helps, but and your support is what makes our work possible. And any of those donations can be made through our website, prcno.org, which Danielle Watson, my colleague who is the ghost in the machine controlling all of this wonderful presentation tonight, will put in the chat, so you'll see it there. And one last thing about that, anyone donating at the $25 level or above, will receive a complimentary copy of our digital design guide. And I'll tell you a little bit more about that because as we go through this presentation, you'll see a little bit about how it works. But that design guide is fabulous. It has all the details on all the houses that are presented this year on Shotgun House Month, and including the materials, the fixtures, the furnishings, the artwork, the paint colors, all of it. And so if you are looking to renovate or just love design like I do and Dee does, it's just fun to play around in and just see and learn more about what made these houses so special. And then finally, Father's Day is this weekend. And if you are still without a gift, PRC's merchandise store on our website is offering 20% off of everything. So books, we have a tremendous amount of books on New Orleans history, architectural history, design. We also have some really fun cheeky t-shirts and masks and tote bags and all kinds of other fun stuff. So check it out. And then let's see, I'm looking at my housekeeping notes, making sure I'm not missing anything. While we're also doing Shotgun House Month this month, we're also launching our new Maintain Right series, which is a really fun thing too. My colleague Anna Pernis is in charge of that program, and it helps provide information for free to homeowners about how to maintain and fix problems in your historic house. And also give you the knowledge of who to call if you can't figure it out. And sometimes that's the biggest challenge of all, is like, what is that spot on my ceiling and what do I do about it? So check it out. We have videos that are up on our website and rolling on our social media. And we are having a whole slate of classes that are also free on our website. You can see the whole schedule. Finally, before we begin, you can see us, but we can't see you. Your videos and your mics are off, but we really encourage your participation through the chat and the Q&A functions at the bottom of your screen. We'd love for your questions. Dee and I are going to walk through the house and chat a bit, and then at the end, we are going to open up to your questions. I'll read them to her, and she'll be able to see them as well. And so please, if you have thoughts, comments, we'd love to see them. So with a little less ado, I'm going to introduce our homeowner, who is Dee Speed. I met Dee a few years ago, and I've been such an enormous fan of her work ever since. She is a native New Orleanian who splits her time between New Orleans and California, where she lives in Silicon Valley and is a director of design for YouTube, and an incredibly impressive resume she has. In addition to that very big job, she also is an interior designer, and she also sells mid-century modern glassware and vintage china through her online studio, which Danielle is going to put in the chat, but it's dd914.com. But she'll put a link to that in the chat function. So welcome, Dee.
Hi, it's so good to see you again.
So good to see you. So for everybody tuning in, yes, we are aware this is not a shotgun house. So let's just start with that.
Yeah, let's start with the obvious.
Kind of obvious, but in case anyone's confused, it is a Creole cottage, and we absolutely know that. But it's such a charmer, we couldn't not put it on. So she's our bonus house for this tour. And I thought we would start outside, Dee, because first of all, it gives everybody a good perspective of the size of the house, because it's really kind of petite. It's about 1,400 square feet.
Yeah. Surprisingly enough, it was a double at one point. So it actually was somehow split up. We couldn't really ever find in all the research that we had done info on exactly what that floor plan was like. But having done some work in the house, I was able to kind of understand, if you see where that third corbel is from the left, that was roughly where the house was sort of divided down the middle. That was confirmed by some of the Sanborn maps from the 1860s, I believe. I think there was one that we were able to find from the 1860s, and it was very tiny, very, very tiny. But she's beautiful, and so it was my job to take care of her.
Good things come in small packages.
They do.
What's fascinating, okay, so your research, you told me you dated it to at least the 1880s on Sanborn maps, but maybe it's as old as the 1860s. Is that correct? Am I saying that right?
Possibly even the 1840s. There were records through some of the guides that were published. You know, we had a lot of those old neighborhood sort of directories that spoke about the owner and what their business was. So as far back as 1860, that's when we knew it first became a bakery. But the first resident potentially at this, when the streets were named differently, was a man by the name of Patrick Kelly, and he was there for a couple of generations with his family, but that's dated 1840. Now, obviously, we can't find physical representation of the house that early, but we're assuming that it was somewhere between 1840 and 1860. We'll say 1860, just, you know, to be safe and to be a little gracious with the time period, given the history of this type of architecture.
It's fascinating to me that it was a double and a bakery / store, because when you look at it, you have to go, where was the bakery? Was it this side? What is your best guess?
Actually, we were able to tell because the ovens for the bakery were mapped out on that Sanborn map. So if you look to the far right, past that second door, sort of where the butt end of that car is, the ovens were back there. The kitchen was an addition. That little back half is the kitchen area, and that was sort of a workspace. But it was an open air workspace, and the ovens were just sort of beyond that. And what's the open sort of courtyard, backyard today. The storefront, along with that, was the entire side of the house that you see on screen here. In the front, that far door on the left, that would have been a very, very small, basically one room, maybe a couple hundred square feet at best, that went straight up vertically into the upstairs space, which was used for storage.
Well, we're going to see the inside in just a second. And I want to let people know that the reason we're doing this, you know, and some of the other ones, if you've tuned in, and in some of the other ones, we've been live in people's homes, the audio visual quality of those have been a little hard. We didn't feel like the feed was as good. So we decided to use this format because we think it's a clearer image and an easier way audio wise for everybody to hear us. But it's also because Dee has recently sold this beautiful little house and bought another house in New Orleans right near it. So I don't know if you're going to be heartbroken watching this, Dee.
It is kind of hard. It's like visiting my old baby. But you know, I want to preserve as many homes as possible here in the Marigny, in my neighborhood, and so it's okay to move on. I know she's got a good new owner, and I'm just down the street, so it's fine.
You can look over her from over there and make sure she's taken well care of. But you grew up in this neighborhood, right?
I did my whole life.
And so
yeah, my grandparents were actually up in the triangle over off of Esplanade and Dauphine, like right where there's that beautiful double story 1801 Dauphine. They had the house right next door. And the numbers have since changed, but they were over there. And then other family was uptown, Garden District, and you know, other family just over in the lower ninth. So I know the area really well.
So when you were looking for a house in New Orleans as your sort of, I won't say second home, because it sounds like you split your time here quite a bit with California. You had to be in the Marigny?
I had to be. It's what suits me personality wise. I also have a lot of friends. My best friend is still, you know, 4 blocks down the street. Now she's only 2 houses away as opposed to, you know, 4 or 5. So it made sense. You know, we hang out a lot. When we travel and we're out of town, all we talk about is being back home. It's walkable. It's just a neighborhood that I know the best. And it was really important to be in a place where I could still see and feel the original architecture. It hadn't either been washed away, but it also hadn't been converted too much and sort of, you know, overly renovated and pulled apart.
One of the quotes in that you gave us for our preservation and print article about this house, which I just love, is that you did more preservation than renovation, which I just think is, you know, such a beautiful philosophy. When less and more preservation, I should get it correct in your quote. And I just think that's such a charming approach, you know, when you're looking at an architecture that is this old and such a vital part of the streetscape, to approach it like from the historic perspective, not just to renovate it for what your modern use may be.
Yeah, I mean, you'll see when you get inside that there are things that easily could have been redone for the sake of convenience or just for an aesthetic that was more modern, but I did not want that.
Well, while we're still on the outside, 2 things that I would love to chat about is, of course, the colors, because they are fabulous. Tell me about these color selections.
They come from a couple of different places. One was that my favorite color is orange, and I always wanted to walk through an orange set of doors. And so that orange is called fall leaf. I used Valspar for those. And the blue was specifically chosen because it's from the National Trust for Historic Preservation. It's called Betsy Ross House Blue. And I wanted to make sure it was something that, while it wasn't sort of like the French Quarter color set, which is fairly well documented for those homes, I wanted something that at least matched the aesthetic of the surrounding homes as well in the neighborhood. So as you can see, my neighbor to the left, he's got a blue. There's another blue across Port with its dark shutters as well. So we're all big fans of blue. It's a really bright and sunny corner, and so it always makes you feel like it's just lit. It's a beautiful, brightly lit place, and the natural light is amazing.
And we always say that New Orleans is the northernmost city of the Caribbean. That colors just prove it, right? I mean, they just go so well, and they make you feel like you're could have a little island vibe, but they also feel so appropriate to me for this area. Well,
Yep.
let's step inside. So what everyone's going to see when we walk inside is this is a 3D tour. This 3D tour is part of our design guide that I mentioned a little while ago that people can get if they donate. And what this has is a 3D walkthrough of the space, which you'll see us do. And then on each of the little buttons that we have in the room, we're not going to go through them all here because we have Dee, so we don't need to pick all the buttons. But if you were at home and doing this, each of those little buttons will give you the name and information about what you're seeing. So it's just a lot of fun. I like this kind of thing, which I totally do. You'll be able to click on them and see the details. And the homeowners on the tour, we have this on each of the houses that are on the tour this year, and they've all been super generous in sharing all their design features, so, including Dee. So let's start in here. So this is what you walk into from the front, from those two shuttered doors, one of which is a set of French doors, but the other is kind of an Eastlake style door. Was that original to the house, Lee?
It was original when I bought it. It's very strange because the door, we've measured it, and I've even tried to find replacements or a backup just because you never know. And it can't be found. It's a custom Eastlake style door, and it's very, very wide. So it just speaks to the updates that had been made to the house prior to purchase, and likely when it was converted over from a double. But yeah, no, most shops have never seen a door that wide, much less that tall. And even that, it's been cut down in its height to fit that frame. So that is a custom piece that was someone decided well back. I think photographically it was there in the early 1900s from what we could see. So it's been with the house for quite a while. And it still meets the same exterior style as most stores that we see in New Orleans.
I mean, it's interesting to me, and it's like fun to speculate and think maybe they put a wide door because it was a storefront and they needed to get stuff in and out. But the storefront might have been the other side though. So.
But I could see it being wide though, just to go vertically up. So the staircase obviously was installed later as a more modern fixture, the spiral staircase. But yeah, if you had to get goods up and down into the storage loft area upstairs, that would have been its natural place to go. So that's pretty interesting.
Well, so stepping inside, we come straight into the living room, which is such a beautifully texture and color rich space. Do you want to tell us a little bit about what your philosophy was when you were designing the space?
Yeah, well, you can see I'm not afraid of color. I'm not afraid of texture or pattern, and the richer, the better. I'm a big fan of velvets. It's just, these are the things that sort of go back to what I knew of as a child growing up in New Orleans. These are our city's colors, the purples, the greens, the gold. It's who we are, you know, the deep foliage. It's just a richness that I don't equate with anywhere else. I have been asked many times to replicate this design for other clients, other places, and I've said no. One, because it's my home, like my personal home, but also it doesn't necessarily suit. This is very much geared to feel like you are in a timeless part of New Orleans. A lot of the furniture are antiques, they're personal. Some of them that we've documented here are more modern pieces, but they fit within the time period at the house and its aesthetic. Some are custom pieces, like the green sofa, for example, was one that I designed. So it's a mix of a lot of different elements. It's not particularly from one style or era, but it all tends to work. It's just being comfortable with the uncomfortable, I would say, in terms of an aesthetic. And I'm a big fan of florals. It's just a girly thing. And so, you know, the fact that the couch, actually the rear of the couch and the front face of the couch matches that wall mural there meant a lot. Like, I like certain things to be connected in really odd ways. You'll see that green show up in other places in the house as necessary. But yeah, it's a lot of personal family pieces mixed with antiques that I've collected over the years on travels when I've been sent to whatever part of the world I have to be working in at that moment.
The tapestry to the right of the mural with the birds, which is an anthropology piece, I believe, is from
Yep.
Belgium, the tapestry, isn't it?
Yes, yes, both. But the one on the left is based on an old Belgian tapestry, and the one on the right is also Belgian tapestry.
Yeah, it's beautiful. But so this room feels very spacious when you're in it, but it's not a big space. It actually goes across, as we see when we'll swing through, it goes across the width of the house. Just the living room and the dining room together. It's not a ton of square footage, but it feels very spacious because of the way you have it designed. And because the ceilings, what's the height of the ceilings? Do you remember?
I think they're close to 14, but I could be wrong. They're definitely tall. I know that the drapes alone are like 99-inch length drapes that pull a little bit on the floor by like 2 or 3 inches. So they're fairly tall. Yeah.
Which gives it that volume that makes it feel so spacious, even in a smaller square footage of a house.
Yeah, it's easy to be thrown off by the staircase too because it's so centrally positioned in the room and you think it would divide it up, but it actually does create a nice division so that you can create two livable spaces in that area.
So that staircase, let's talk a little bit about it. That was there when you purchased the house, is that correct?
Yes.
And it goes to a bedroom and bathroom on the second floor that looks to
Mhm.
have been originally in the attic, would you say?
It was completely unfinished. It was bare out to the slate, the rafters. You could see straight through in some places to the sky. There was no drywall, but I wanted to have it finished off. So even when I got it, when I bought the house, there was half drywall and then just open space. You were able to see the rest of the chimney stack, sort of the second half of it as it went up through the house, and it was beautiful brick. It looked like at one point someone had wanted to cover that up again to try to modernize it, but again to do more restoration rather than renovation. Kept the floors original, kept the stack exposed, and only added the drywall where it made sense. That and insulation to just be functional, right? To make it a bedroom to accommodate for the heat in the summer, things like that. Yeah. And that ended up becoming my little boy's room, which he loves and misses terribly to this day. It's a beautiful space for kids.
We will definitely go up there, but I think we should go around the house first before we go upstairs.
Yeah.
Um, Before we leave this room, I would be remiss to not ask about some of these beautiful fixtures. That green chest has a story.
Mhm.
You want to share it?
Yeah, that it's tied into my family. So my mother's maiden name, oddly enough, is Green. And her father, my grandfather, made that cabinet. It's been in my family for as long as I can remember. I used to hide things in there. I used to take out the linen napkins, where I keep mine now that my grandmother used to have in there. So it's been in the family for quite some time. And it's probably one of my favorite pieces just because for some reason, it visually represents my family.
Visually, and it's the name. So,
Mhm, exactly.
um, Daniil, if you go back toward the sofas, I believe there's a portrait of, is it your on the
That's my
wall?
mom. Yeah, that's my
That's
mom.
your mom. Such a beautiful
That
portrait.
is my favorite portrait of my mom. It was done by a friend of mine, Maya, who's an amazing portrait artist. She's just painted so many people across the United States and globally. She even teaches portraiture. But I told her, I said, when I finally buy a place back home, I want to see my mother in there so that also when I go, I can also have a family portrait and my little boy will be able to see his mother there. And she's like, okay, well, and like, what's your favorite photo of your mom? And this was when my mom was, you can't tell obviously because it's kind of cut off, but she was 2 months pregnant with me at the time. And I thought, oh, this is so beautiful. This is my mom. So yeah, she painted the portrait for me and that's where she hangs. She watches over everything.
So it's technically your mom and you because she was pregnant with
Technically.
you.
Yeah.
What other, so when you purchased the house, what was the condition of this room? Was it the walls were already sheetrock or were they still plaster or?
They were sheetrocked. It was just in bad shape. There was just a lot of like nailing things directly into sheetrock. It was old. There was a bit of mold, not from like water. I think it might have been a humidity issue that had never been fully addressed. The floors or these are the original floors that have always been with the house, that we were able to find out. I've even had them looked at from the underside to ensure that these were original. We could tell from the nails, and I've tripped over a couple of hand cut square nails in the past where they've somehow risen up over time. But there was very little to do other than light sheetrock, some patching on the walls. The ceiling was in great condition, and the floors just needed a really light sanding, and just a sealant on them to protect them. And they're not perfect. They're knotty. I spend most of my time in that house barefoot because I like to feel those floors beneath my feet, and they're amazing. They stay cool when they need to. They warm up a little bit when they need to. It's just the character of the house, and it's one of the things I definitely did not want to part with.
The shutters on so this room has two sets of full shutters and French doors, and then the East Light door has shutters as well. Were those original, or did you have to remill them to match others
They
that
had
were?
to be remilled. We had removed the original shutters and took them to Nola Millworks, and I said I want these basically recreated. I need these recreated like line for line, pattern for pattern, and I want to replace them. And they were just, well, first we were going to try to restore them, which was the obvious thing, but they were just so far gone and so damaged that there was just nothing to do. So we came back with exact replicas, but with cedar to make sure that they could last a lot longer. And they've been in great shape ever since. So it's the doors that you see here on the left, the one in front at the end of the dining table, the main east like door, and then also the window shutters, because there's the small window over an armchair, and those were all reshuttered.
The doors themselves were in decent shape, or did you have to have those?
Oh, they're still wonderful and working. We did not touch those, and they didn't need it. I mean, I didn't even patch tiny holes that were in the patina. Everything was kept as is. Just they're stunning, especially up close. Like you could just look at these doors for hours and find some new little thing in them to draw your attention. But yeah, they're original to the house. Even the panes of glass are original.
Wonderful. And when I was in the house with you, I love seeing the original hardware. You can see it here in this picture on the left. The original hardware is still there,
Mm-hmm.
which is just I don't know. I'm one of those people who I can just imagine, like the generations of people at different time periods opening up those doors. Like imagine in the 1800s, and then imagine in the 1920s and the 1940s, and
Yeah.
throwing open those doors and what the streets beyond it were like.
And they're not easy to open. Like
Yeah, they're
it
not
would have
easy.
been so much easier to mill them to close perfectly, to remove the hardware and get hardware that, just glided. And it's like, no, I want to work for these doors. They've been here longer than I've been alive. So I should be respectful of them. And yeah, I've broken many a nail, and in some cases they've drawn blood, but they are what they are. And so, yeah, and they just happen to match a piece that I've since had in my collection, that bar stand that you see right there, the green chippy one, very similar in state, similar wood even to the doors. And so it was like these things just fell into place as the house was developing over time.
Well, you had told me that you had had stuff that you had purchased on different travels and had in your life for years and years and never had on display or a place to put them until you bought this house. Is that
Yeah.
correct?
Yep. I kind of knew I was
These
going
were
to
like,
come back home. And so I saved them just for that purpose. Yep.
it's sort of like things meant to be, right? When we
Mm-hmm.
were in the home, it was really lovely how you used to have the doors open and keep the shutters closed. So you got
Mm-hmm.
nice natural light. You still had a little bit of privacy, but you had a lot of lovely, air coming off the river because you're only a few blocks. And then
Mm-hmm.
you could hear like roots of music when they were playing in the street. What are some of the things you loved most about spending time in that room?
I mean, I do a lot of drawing or painting, and so the light has always been amazing. The light apparently was so good that Popeyes decided to film a commercial right there in the living room at one point. And so it's a calm space. If you notice, there's not a lot of like a garish electric light. There are antique lamps that have a very warm feel. There's no tech in the house aside from like the thermostat. You won't find a TV. If anything, we'll play, we'll have like a manual radio and we'll play, the radio, look, a radio station or something like that. But it's just peaceful and it's calm. and it's a place that we all can be at one time but not feel on top of each other. So it's a family room. It's one that we're happy to be in, and it gets a little loud in there. We know neighbors will come over, they'll poke in and stop and say, or you hear the music coming up the street. So it's just a good room to be in. It feels good.
I just want to remind everybody that this is a design director for YouTube who says she has no tech in her house. It's a wonderful
I hate it. I hate it.
It's so great. Someone who lives in Silicon Valley who has no tech in her house.
And you wonder why I run home to New Orleans. Yeah.
Right. That's how you escape it, right? Well, let's
Totally.
move beyond this fabulous room and to the next room, which is equally charming. So Danielle's going to drive. And we go down this little hall. It's not even a hall, it just goes from one room to the other. So this is really still sort of the square kind of Creole cottage 4-room square design. Probably was original to the house. We don't know what the floor plan was. You have no idea what the original floor plan was?
We do know that the house actually ended there. Before you would go into the kitchen, because the kitchen is a slight step down by about 2.5 inches. That was added on. And actually, it was more like it was closed in. So it was open towards back where the ovens were for the bakery. But at some point in history, it was obviously closed in to make it a full kitchen. I can tell that it was still a full kitchen as early as the mid 1900s, and it had been closed in at that point. There was wood paneling. This room, the same. This room had a lot of dark wood paneling in it that just had been layered on top of the walls. And some of it got exposed. But again, original floors, still knotty with its little holes. You see the original fireplace stack. At some point, that mantle was added. Very simple, but it fit with the very simple look of the room. It wasn't too overly ornate, and it was also appropriate for not only the time frame, but the neighborhood itself. It wasn't as something as ostentatious as you might find uptown. And so it just, again, kept all very simple. This room for me, though, is sort of the heart of the house. It's where we tend to sit in the mornings, especially when my mom is there. It's the one that feels more like a tribute to the family, because obviously it's got an altar there of things I've collected or that have been passed down for years. My father's trumpet is on there, and he was a jazz player. He played at so many different clubs around New Orleans. I'm probably outing myself, but I can say that now that he's not around, I snuck in to see him play a lot when I was a kid. And then all the portraits on the walls are generations of my family, and my son's family and my husband's family, so that he can see where he comes from.
And then you have a altar of sorts on the mantle.
Mm-hmm.
Talk a little bit about what's on that.
I mean, it's New Orleans, so you are going to see everything from gris-gris to voodoo dolls to old bones that have been used in ceremonies, candles, stuff they're all like, they're spiritual artifacts that have been meaningful to my family. They talk about where we come from. My father has lineages from Nigeria and from Benin. So, you'll see some African masks on there. You'll see bones. There's actually bones from a dog of mine that I had as a child that I just didn't want to let go of. It's a way for us culturally, the way I grew up and the way we were taught to keep in touch with our ancestors. And so when I'm in that room, I feel like I'm with my family. You think I'm crazy, but I talk to my family all the time in that room. I talk to my dad, especially since he's no longer here, but it gives me a place to see and to be with them at one time. And that said, like, if you look to the left there is a statue of the Madonna. She's wearing a good 4 generations of rosaries that have been passed down through my family. And so I'm the keeper of those and collect them. And it'll get passed on at some point in the future, but that's where they come from.
And then there's a chair in this room that is your mom's chair, right?
Mm-hmm. And it's my mom's chair because she doesn't want anyone else to sit in it. So the one that's right underneath all the portraits, she claimed that one years ago. It was a chair I had specially designed and made by Horchow. And they liked it so much they decided that they would sell similar styles of it in their collection. But yeah, that was designed specifically for her. So that's her chair.
When your son is in this room, what does he interact with most here?
He
generation.
immediately reaches for my dad's trumpet. He's very much into music. The other things, I think he has a notion of that they're holy in some way, or they're relics, not to really touch them. They're not toys, but he'll just sit and kind of sit in the chair there and kick his feet, or ask, when are we going to have beignets, or some other treat, when are we going to get chicken? So yeah, it's a quiet place. We kind of just sit there in the mornings and then move around through the rest of the house.
Yeah. And the light comes in here. There's another set of French doors
Mhm.
and shutters on the other side of the wall that really let that beautiful sort of filtered light come through. And I imagine it's a great place just to sit and read a book. Under
Yep,
these.
room still maintains its breeze window right there that you can see. And then the only other lighting source is my grandmother's house that she lost over in the lower ninth. I was able to still keep the chandelier that she'd had in her dining room, and so that was moved over into this house as well.
So that was when her home flooded in Katrina?
Yeah.
And so that was saved? Oh, wow. That's
Yeah.
special. So then let's go through to the kitchen, because the kitchen is the one that you've most recently renovated.
Yeah, the kitchen and the main bath on the first floor were the most recent. So this
I
this
love
room
what you did in
had
this
no
space
style.
because now it's lots of style now.
So it
Um,
does now, but at the time it was just very rectangular. I think at one point there was a very strange pole, and it wasn't load bearing, but it was a very strange pillar um, in the middle of the room. And Ellen, yes, to your question, it did stay with the house. It felt very appropriate that it stayed with the house, and it was something I wanted to make sure that the new owner had. It just fits the room. It suits it very beautifully. But as far as the kitchen, yeah, as you can tell, this was the rear of the house. This had been closed in, and there were multiple layers of things, to the degree that when we did renovate this and we started peeling back the walls, we peeled back about 6 layers, even found some of the old barge board on the left and right walls. And the green that you see there, the beadboard, we kept. I wanted to keep that. It had always been on the exterior of the house at the back. That door was a door to nowhere. It literally was just what we did back in the day, when someone decided that they needed to fill in a wall, they would just either leave it there or use something very large to fill that space in and then cover over it. And so that door was actually in the dead center of that wall behind the white cabinets on the right. And
or a
as
way to
far as
know.
the style, yeah, as far as the styling goes, again, kept it very similar and simple. And it needed to be functional. I mean, obviously, it's a kitchen. And so went with very simple fixtures, white cabinets, um, black hardware. Obviously, it's a gas stove. It's fairly modern, but it matches the refrigerator. And I did want a dishwasher just because usually I cook a lot. I have a lot of family over, so making sure they were there. But a farm sink, the black hexagon tiles, just very classic and timeless without being overly modern. And if anyone is like me and you watch a lot of HGTV, we can all admit it, for one. But two, I'm not a big fan of islands. So even though the kitchen is a very wide area to pass through, I didn't want to carve up the space too much with too many modern fixtures. And islands it just doesn't seem appropriate for this style of house. It's not something we would have had at the time.
What I love about this is it is a modern as far as functionality kitchen, and is beautiful. Your design in here is just lovely. It really does feel like, even though they wouldn't have had an attached kitchen in this house when it was built, it feels like it could be original to the house. Clearly that that siding on the weatherboards on that back wall probably indicates that was the end of the house.
Mm-hmm.
And so,
It surely was the end of the house. And like I said, there's a slight step down. Um, I didn't want to raise it because it would have changed a bit on the roof line on the exterior. And some things I just don't, it's not that it's too much work. It's just they don't really need to be touched. It just didn't need it. And so a step down wasn't so bad to this threshold, but everything was re-leveled. And I think someone had actually made a comment about the doors are a little off. And I'm like, yeah, And that's New Orleans. I take photographs around town all the time, and I can never get a right angle in a photo to save my life. So it's just something that I have to live with anywhere in the city, and it's okay.
I mean, it's part of sort of the authenticity of New Orleans is that everything's a little not square. we're, not,
Yeah, we
we're a
are
little
not plum.
one. Well, and I can't leave this room without pointing out her gorgeous jadeite that's over by the sink. I am a huge china lover, and you have the most beautiful china and glassware and vintage tea sets. I want to come over and have tea with you one day.
Oh, you will. Give me a couple of weeks to get back, and we will
I know,
definitely
it's a
have
new place. So tell us about what made you want to collect these vintage pieces.
Actually, again, I grew up with a lot of these pieces. I don't think at the time it was just functional for my grandmother. I learned to cook in her kitchen, and it was her and my mom and all my aunts and uncles. This was just the stuff that I grew up with. Jadeite was so common back then that we didn't think about it. I mean, now it's priced ridiculously, and yes, I can make a killing on reselling original jadeite pieces, but it's just what I had, and so these aren't modern pieces. They're not replicas. Many of them, even the bowls, especially the mixing bowls, they are originals, and I still use them. So when I cook, it's just memories of what I learned and what I grew up with. I'm using the same bowls. I'm still beating eggs in the same bowl. My mixer might be a little different because, yeah, some of that's a little too archaic for my taste, but you get the feel for it. And the china, like the tea sets and the plates and things like that, just love and passion. I'm a big fan of French pottery, French tea sets. And again, I think it's just something I inherited from my mom and my grandmother, because if you were to open those cabinets, there's probably not a single teacup that matches itself. I don't like things to be very matchy. I'm not sure you could tell by the house, but yeah, I love having formal tea, high tea. And I love having guests and entertaining. So a lot of the glassware and things like that are meant so that when you sit down, there's things to look at and touch and feel. And sure, it's old. Sure, it's an antique. I'm not worried that something's ever going to get broken or damaged. Um, I think it's just you appreciate things more when they have an age to them and a history.
I'm a big believer in you got to use the good stuff, because if it only just sits in a
Mm-hmm.
cabinet, that it meant
Yep.
for, right? Use the good stuff. Okay, well, as much as I hate to leave this beautiful room, let's go into the bedroom. Danielle, if you could take us there. She's driving this train.
Come into my bedroom.
Come into the bedroom. I love the simplicity of this room. Tell us about what you did here.
I need a place to sleep away from Silicon Valley, where the only sounds that get in are the train over on Press Street, or on really good days when you can hear the steamboat whistle in the morning. And people are obviously going out on tours or whatever. But this is also sort of a throwback to how I remember my grandparents' bedroom. It was very simple, nothing ostentatious. I think the only thing that really special I gave myself was the velvet chair, the Victorian chair. But two portraits by one of the portraits on the left, local artist, um, reminds me of my grandfather. Like this whole house, if you guys haven't figured it out by now, is a tribute to my family, and it's like a living memory of them. And then the picture on the right, which is a bit more of a modern portrait, reminds me of my grandmother. And these are my paternal grandparents that we're talking about in this room. So yeah, the goal was to just keep it very simple. Again, nothing really matches. The two lamps, I think the bedside lamps are the only thing that actually match. The quilt on the bed, it's over 40 years old. I'm happy to date myself, but my grandmother made that for me when I was born, and I still sleep with that. I still sleep with it every day. So it's like another family heirloom. It's been patched and repatched multiple times with either clothing from my family, my own clothes, my kids' clothes, and then that art piece on the wall was something I made. We would go to church up in the Tremaine. It's funny because I was just talking to someone online a couple of days ago about this, but those were her church fans. And so for whatever reason, those things usually get thrown out, they go away. But for us culturally, you can talk to a lot of folks in the Treme or elsewhere, just Black culture, and they'll tell you the two they remember the most are the Martin Luther King fan and the Mahalia Jackson fan. And so it's like I have a stack of these things that I love and I want to preserve them. So what better way was to get some velvet that was the same color as some of the drapes we used to have, and then mount them on that and put them on the wall. So again, it's a very quiet, simple space, good place to sleep. It gets light at the latter end of the day rather than in the morning, so you can sleep in and be quite lazy on a weekend.
And what's nice is that although this room is white, it still has a lot of color from the
Hmm.
chair and the quilt, and it sort of can be this quiet space, but still have a lot of texture and vibrancy in it.
This room did sadly have to have its floors redone. There had been tile laid over top of the original hardwood. Um, and there had been at some point water damage to this back rear part of the house. I think probably because it was just so hard to access that people just didn't put the time and the effort in. But we could not save the floors here, and so all of the old tile got taken out. Everything was re-leveled, and then also the new flooring was put in. And we tried our best to match what we could, um, with sort of linear, the way that it lined up with the boards in the other rooms, and then color as well.
You did an amazing job. Um, so I think we just need to go upstairs. Danielle, can you take us there? Because this house, like we mentioned in the beginning, is only about 1,465 square feet. So it's
Mhm.
petite.
Oh,
Oh,
that was the last renovation, actually,
bathroom.
was the
Yeah,
bathroom.
we got to go in the bathroom. The bathroom's fabulous. I love this bathroom. I love the tile and I love the little fixture, the fan above. So tell us this was one of the most recent renovations, correct?
Yeah, this was the one that was completed as of, what are we now, July? May of this year. So this was completed in May. Um, Not much changed about this bathroom. The the footprint of the plumbing and all is still the same. The only thing we did was to swap the location of the sink and the toilet, because you don't want to lay in bed and look into your bathroom and see a toilet. So we moved that around, but the French doors were already there. The window was already there, and it's fully functioning. It contains inside that closet, a stacked washer dryer unit where we do laundry. And I just focused on, again, really simple, classic fixtures. The interesting problem that we have, though, and I think a lot of people have this when they look at doing interiors, is ceiling fans and light fixtures. Ceiling fans are never graceful and they're terrible. And it took probably a year's worth of time to find the ceiling fan that's in this room. And I hope it's in the resource guide because I get asked about it a lot. Very compact, very low profile, beautiful lighting, but at the same time, it's got a tiny fan which produces a lot of air. So I love bathrooms. I don't want to go into a bathroom and feel like I'm getting dirty just to get clean. And so this just had to be all cleaned out. And as you can see from the reno photos, we had to tear it down to the studs. There had just been years of neglect with water damage and things like that. My contractor who worked on this project with me, Tom Hall, he's also a beautiful cabinet maker, which is why I picked him for the job. Obviously, none of our houses really had a fair amount of storage. And so this room alone has ample storage, everything from clothing to cleaning materials to storage for bed and bath linens. It's got it all. And the shower stall is large. It's actually large enough for two. It's a little difficult to tell here, but it's a beautiful space. Probably my favorite room in the house.
I love the tile. What
Yeah,
is
the
the tile?
tile is amazing.
It's terrific.
I think it's called Galactic. It's getting pretty popular. I've seen it in a couple of places, but more folks are using it for a backsplash. I kind of wanted to bring the sky to the floor, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
It's just great. And when it was paired with like a terracotta colored grout, because they are terracotta ceramic tiles, it just made the room stay with that same look and feel. It wasn't too garish. We weren't trying to do anything too modern with it. It kept it very simple and pretty. And
It
then
has,
the hardware on the doors are their vintage antique crystal and brass handles.
mhm. It just has a lovely patina to it, even though
Hmm.
it's new. It feels like it could have been there. And that ceiling fan, I think that was the first thing when I walked in your house. I was like, tell me about that ceiling fan because I need that ceiling fan. Because it's so hard to find a cute, small ceiling fan and to have the fixture in it. It's just adorable. So
Yeah.
it is in the design guide. Yeah, this is a lovely bathroom. Fun, fun, fun. Okay, let's head upstairs, up those spiral stairs.
Yeah, watch
Danielle,
your step going up there, please.
I know, watch your step. Danielle, you're doing an awesome job driving this. I wanted her to do it because I was like, I don't want to go too fast and make people's heads spin. But it really is very smooth to operate. And you operate it with just your mouse, so it's pretty cool.
I wish this had existed years ago when I would do other client projects, other interior design projects. It's an amazing way to document things. I would do this personally just for insurance reasons, because you just never know. You know where things sit physically. You've got a sense of space. You could literally highlight and pick particular objects that you want to call out and highlight and have a record of. I mean, digital technology has just gotten amazing with the things that it can do. And if this is how we can move ahead in the future in documenting homes to preserve their state, even if they change in the interior, I'm all for it. Let's do it.
So that's a really great idea to use this technology to document for even insurance purposes. I hadn't thought about that. You know, we've taken still photography in my house, just, you know, like
Yeah.
everyone's told to do for your records in case, goodness, we don't even want to say it in case.
Mm-hmm.
But this is even better because it really does show where everything fits and how it all fits together. Yeah, it's kind of a smart move. So this charming space is your little boy's space, right?
Yeah. It was, again, the window was there, but it was in very rough shape. And there behind us over our shoulder, which I'm sure we'll get to in a minute, there is a bathroom with a closet in there. But this space, the ceilings were unfinished. There was no light fixture. You could literally see out to the roof. And so this had to all get filled in with drywall. But the floors are stunning. They're beautiful. They're original. The AC and heating unit is actually just on the other side of that partition. And obviously we need to be able to access it through those doors to service it. But it's just a great play space for him. It feels like he has his own spot. And the one thing I gave myself in this house that I'd always wanted, a very girly ladies bathroom where I could have like a little soak tub and a chandelier and marble sinks and things like that. And so we were able to fit that in that small space without doing too much to the room. It's got an odd shape, but I love working with odd shapes, so everything was able to fit in there.
It really is. This is such a master house as far as showing that you don't need more space to make it absolutely livable and charming. I mean, this bathroom has everything you would want. You have a soaking tub, you have beautiful fixtures. I love how, and when Danielle swings back around, we can see how the toilet is on an angle. Which is really kind of fun. If you can make a toilet fun, it does. So this space was it a bathroom when you bought it? Did it have plumbing already up there?
It did have some, no, it had some plumbing. I think it had the plumbing for the toilet, but then we had to redo some of the room, obviously, to be able to get a better sink in and for the tub to be there. So additions again, but the floor is original. You can tell from the window frame, it's the original window frame that was on that part of the house. It still has some of that same like bluish green chippy paint near the bottom, and again left all that as it was. The only thing I think that to take us back to the exterior for a minute, that entire side of the house had a lot of rot and just damage from the sun and the elements over time. But it's the side that often gets the most light, and when the storms come in, the rain hits, that's the side that takes the brunt of it all. That entire side of the house had to be redone. So we had to completely shear all of it off, take off all the siding and redo it, remove a lot of rot that was there, and just bring it back to what it was.
Ellen had a question that was exactly the question I was just about to ask, is how did you get the tub up there?
Through the window.
Through the window?
Through the window.
With it?
Yep. It turned on its side and it came through the window.
You have to have really good people that you trust to do that, to lift that tub up.
I didn't trust them, but they proved me wrong. I was so afraid that it was going to come crashing through the floor on the ground, but they did a great job.
It's amazing. my sister lived in the Netherlands for a few years, and in Dutch houses, they bring a ton of stuff because they're all really tall and skinny, and in some ways remind me of New Orleans houses. They're like shotguns, but tall, and they bring a lot of their furniture through the upper windows, and they have a hook. Many of them have a hook on the outside of the building that they can like adhere a big pulley thing to and swing them into the buildings. That's some serious
I
moving.
wondered at one point if this house actually had that, because remember, this whole upstairs area was storage. When we did remove the siding, we found um, there's like a stud that runs along that near where the window is, and it had these really interesting bolts in it. So at some point it looked like someone had mounted something, and we saw similar things like downstairs on the corner of the house. There was and you can actually see a photograph of it, I believe, in the Creole Faubourg's book, where the sign for the store was attached to the corner of the house that sort of jutted out in the street for you to know. But yeah, we found things like that. And while we couldn't prove that what they were definitively, it would have been interesting that they could use that hook. Otherwise, they were going up a vertical ladder with grain sacks and everything else. Who knows what it was?
Right. I mean, again, it's just like, don't you want to time travel for just a second to see what that looked like? I wouldn't want to live
I
there.
do so badly.
I don't want to live in that time period. I don't want to have problems, but I would love to just time travel for a minute and see what it was like. Did you know the name of the bakery? Did they have a sign for it, you said?
You could tell where there was a sign there, but I don't know.
Okay.
It was, not sure. There's in the documentation, I think his name was James Rackenbeck, if I am pronouncing it right. Sorry, Mr. Rackenbeck, wherever you are in history. But it might have been named after him. But it was a family, a couple generations of bakers that ran it. I also want to know what they baked. I mean, I'd love to know recipes and stuff. So
Did they bake bread? Did they bake pastries? I want to know.
I know.
I think we're going to have some good questions. Ellen said, wait, where did it go? Is there a closet up there in the second
There
floor?
is. It runs the length of the bathroom. It was just the entrance to it was just beyond the marble sink, and it's quite lengthy actually.
Let's see. And you answered the question. Somebody had asked about the plumbing vent on the outside.
Yeah, to keep the aesthetic clean and not have a lot of hardware to the outside, like bracers and things where that vent is, it's actually secured from the inside. So we went through the wall and went through to reach it on the outside to secure it back in, to guard against that. Those things, again, that side of the house gets so much natural light, and when storms come, it really hits that side. We didn't want those things to break down too readily over time. It's also a difficult place to get to, so those things are embedded on the inner side of where that vent is, out of sort of the elements as much as we could.
Pam asked about the spiral staircase and whether they meet code today. It is a very wide staircase. Like when you're in the room, it's a fairly wide staircase that doesn't feel not secure. I don't know what the code would be, but it would seem like it would. Do you know, Dee?
I do, just from having worked on them in other projects. It's spiral staircases have to have a firm base, and they have to be um, that's because the house is not on a slab. It had to be mounted in the floor a certain way. In terms of its dimensions, its staircase, it's pretty practical. It's not unlike anything you would find today. It's not like the tiny French ones that they would have had. This one had obviously been put and added to the house at some point in the 20th century, so it still meets to standards for today. But like anyone, anytime you try to get anything up those, just a little bit of advice, you lay your item on the railing and wind it up. You twist it up like a corkscrew. That way you're not trying to carry and turn something with you by hand when you go up there. And so things in that room, like the beds, actually did go up via the staircase, not through the window.
Wow. But it doesn't feel like when you're on it, it's not intimidating. Some spirals are really tiny. Like I actually have a very tiny spiral staircase in my house that people see it, they're like, you go up that thing, because I have a loft in my house. But yours is much more user friendly. It's wider and doesn't feel doesn't feel rickety or anything like that. And I don't know how else you would have put a staircase in there. You know, you would have taken up a lot of that room if it had a regular stairwell.
Yeah, too much of the room. And that might also be the reason for that door, the front door having been so wide, or else you'd have to remove a good portion of the house to get that staircase in.
Okay, so Denise asks, what about the fans in the living room and the dining room? The ceiling fans in the living room and the dining room.
Those were there when I bought the house. They're pretty standard. You can find those same ceiling fans today, and they're excellent and they're so needed, especially on the days where it's not quite so hot that you need the AC unit on, but you do want the breeze. Actually, the house stays relatively cool to the point where usually when we're downstairs, we would have the fans on and the breeze window open, and it gets a good flow of air through without needing to even turn the AC unit on.
Well, the tall ceilings, make such a difference. Jay, I see your message about the circles, and this is a 3D tour. These are actual, these are clearly the real pictures, but in each of those little buttons, those little circles, you can click on them and it has more information about the items. And this is part of our design guide that we did this year for the shotgun houses, and each of the houses featured on the tour has this treatment, and the homeowners were very generous to share all the details with us. So it's kind of fun. And anyone who donates to the tour at $25 or more will get a copy of this. It's a digital thing. We can email to you, and it has more photos of the houses, these 3D tours, lots more information, and also lots of fun history of how shotguns evolved in New Orleans. A column by Richard Campanella and another column by Robert Cangelosi, two preeminent historian professors in town. So good stuff in there. Let's see. Oh, and he asked about what is jadeite. We were talking about jadeite earlier. Do you want to tell the?
Yeah, jadeite is that green, that soft green colored glass that was made really popular in the mid-centuries because it could be mass produced. And that's what you'll see of those pieces in the kitchen. It's become really collectible in recent years just because of the resurgence of a lot of mid-century. Martha Stewart even brought it back and re-released her own version of it that was sort of more modern made. It's not hand blown like some of the Italian pieces I sell. It was more mass produced. That's why there were just so many pieces and you found it in so many kitchens. But yeah, it's beautiful glass to cook with. It's heavy. The bowls don't sort of roll and wobble when you use them. Just very quality, mass-produced stuff for the time.
I think we've answered everyone. If anyone else has any more questions, I just want to say this was so lovely, and it's always so much fun to spend time with you, even virtually, Dee. You have such an enormous talent, and I can't wait to see what you do with your new place. Hopefully you'll share it.
I can't wait to have you all. Yeah, I want you to come to that in person. Please come in person.
Yes, well, we can come back to, well, so speaking of that, we are going to do our holiday home tour in person as well as virtually, because we did a virtual series last year. A little different than we do shotgun. It was like pre-recorded, done by a local videography team. And we had such a great response from people all over the world. I mean, we had people tuning in from the UK and France and the Netherlands for that tour, that we will bring some element of that back this year. And then we're also going to have an in-person tour in the Garden District as we did prior to the pandemic. And so we're very excited to do that.
I can't wait. Thank you for giving me my dream, because as a kid, I was like, I want to have a house so nice that it's featured.
Oh my goodness, yes. Well, any house of yours, I'm sure would be wonderful to feature, and I can't wait to see what you do with another one. So thank you so much for your time, and thanks everybody for tuning in.
Thank you.
Bye.